At 3:47 this morning, 12 hours after the Senate convicted and removed the president from office, federal law enforcement entered the Oval Office. 4 deputy U.S. Marshals, 3 Secret Service agents acting under Director Kimberly Cheadle's orders, and 1 FBI supervisor coordinating the operation. They found the former president seated at the Resolute desk alone, reading documents. The lead marshal identified himself and stated, "Sir, the Senate of the United States has convicted and removed you from office. You are no longer the president. We are here to facilitate your departure from the White House. Will you come with us voluntarily?" According to sources present in the room, the former president responded, "This is illegal. I am the president. I was elected by the American people. You have no authority to remove me." The marshal replied, "Sir, the Constitution gives the Senate authority to remove presidents through conviction. That authority was exercised yesterday. We are executing a lawful order. Please come with us." At 4:03 a.m., 16 minutes after federal agents entered the Oval Office, the former president walked out of the White House for the last time. Subscribe to this channel immediately, because what I am about to walk you through is not a political victory or defeat. This is the moment the American constitutional system proved it can enforce its most serious remedy, even when a president refuses to accept it. This is the Secret Service, as Director Cheadle promised, facilitating the lawful transfer of power. And this is democracy surviving its greatest test. Turn on notifications. Set them to all, because the constitutional crisis that has consumed the country for weeks ended at 4:03 a.m. when the former president left the White House. The question now is what kind of country emerges from this crisis, and whether the institutions that enforced removal can maintain public trust. Here's what happened during the 12 hours between the Senate conviction and the physical removal, because the timeline reveals how the standoff ended. At 6:23 p.m. yesterday, U.S. Marshals arrived at the White House Northwest Gate and were blocked by Secret Service agents loyal to the former president. That standoff continued through the evening. At 8:47 p.m., Secret Service Director Cheadle arrived at the White House personally. She entered through a secure entrance and met with agents on the Presidential Protection Detail. According to sources, she told agents directly, "The Senate has removed him. He is no longer the president. Our oath is to the Constitution, not to any person. We will not prevent the lawful execution of a Senate conviction. Any agent who obstructs federal law enforcement from executing lawful orders will be terminated and potentially prosecuted." At 9:34 p.m., 3 agents assigned to the detail left the White House and joined the protection team for the new president. At 10:15 p.m., 2 more agents departed. By midnight, only 7 Secret Service agents remained with the former president. And those 7 were wavering. At 1:47 a.m., Director Cheadle met with the remaining agents and gave them a direct order: stand down, allow the marshals to enter, facilitate departure, or resign immediately and face disciplinary action. At 2:34 a.m., the last of the holdout agents stood down. The path was clear for federal law enforcement to enter. At 3:00 a.m., the U.S. Marshal Service, coordinating with Secret Service and FBI, finalized the plan. 4 marshals would enter the Oval Office. 3 Secret Service agents would accompany them to demonstrate that the Secret Service supported the operation. FBI would secure the perimeter. The goal was peaceful departure. But the marshals were authorized to use necessary force if the former president physically resisted. At 3:47 a.m., they entered. Hit that like button right now if you understand what just happened. Federal law enforcement removed a former president from the White House 12 hours after the Senate convicted him because he refused to leave voluntarily. The algorithm decides what breaks through. You decide whether this analysis reaches people who need to see it. Because what I am showing you is the constitutional system enforcing removal, even when the removed president resisted with every tool available. At 3:47 a.m., the confrontation in the Oval Office lasted 16 minutes. The former president was not alone when agents entered. 2 personal aides were present, 1 private attorney, and 1 remaining political advisor. All were asked to leave the room. They complied. The former president was then given the choice: leave voluntarily or be escorted. According to the sources, he stated, "I will not leave voluntarily. If you remove me, you are violating the Constitution and committing an illegal act. I will fight this in court. I will take this to the American people, but I will not walk out of this office of my own free will." The lead marshal responded, "Sir, we understand your position. But the law is clear. The Senate convicted. You are removed. We are obligated to execute that removal. We prefer this to be peaceful. Will you walk with us, or do we need to physically escort you?" The former president stood. He gathered some personal items from the desk: papers, a phone, a photo, and he stated, "You are making a historic mistake. The American people will not forget this. I am being removed illegally. But I will not give you the satisfaction of dragging me out. I will walk, but under protest, and this is not over. At 4:03 a.m., the former president walked out of the Oval Office flanked by U.S. Marshals. Secret Service agents who had stood down watched silently. He walked down the hallway, through the West Wing, and out to the South Lawn. A government vehicle was waiting. Not Marine One, not a presidential motorcade. A standard black SUV. The former president got in the back seat. The vehicle departed the White House grounds. And for the first time since the crisis began, the White House was no longer occupied by someone the Senate had removed from office. Drop a comment right now.
Domingo 8 de febrero. Un juez federal acaba de ordenar a los U.S. Marshals que actúen contra Ivanka Trump. 47.3 millones, 127 documentos, una sentencia de prisión sobre la mesa. El jueves se publica la presentación judicial. El viernes se envían a los alguaciles. El sábado, la familia Trump guarda silencio. 3 días. Eso es todo lo que hizo falta para que esto escalara. Según los documentos judiciales presentados en el Distrito Sur de Nueva York, Ivanka Trump no cumplió con la fecha límite de entrega ordenada por el tribunal. Y aquí está la parte que nadie vio venir. Melania Trump, cuando el asesor legal le pidió que prestara un testimonio que pudiera reducir la sentencia de Ivanka, se negó públicamente y consta en acta. La respuesta de Trump: les mostraré la declaración. Es algo que he estado revisando en estos expedientes. Contexto rápido. Ivanka Trump, ex asesora principal de la Casa Blanca, hija de Donald Trump, casada con Jared Kushner. El problema. Fue declarada culpable de fraude financiero y obstrucción de la justicia derivados de negocios extranjeros durante la administración de su padre. Versión rápida de la cronología. Hace meses, los investigadores federales citaron registros financieros vinculados a un acuerdo inmobiliario en Dubái por valor de $340 millones. Semanas después, un gran jurado la acusó de 7 cargos. El mes pasado fue declarada culpable de 5 de esos cargos. Se dictó sentencia, 36 meses de prisión federal. Se ordenó la entrega voluntaria y ella no se presentó. Ese es el escenario. El juez, nombrado durante la administración de Obama, así que sí, los críticos señalan eso, emitió una orden de detención y luego, el jueves, escaló a los U.S. Marshals. Aquí es donde esto se complica. Melania Trump fue citada como testigo de moralidad. Es estándar en las apelaciones de sentencia. Los miembros de la familia suelen testificar. Ella se presentó a la declaración, leyó su declaración preparada y cuando se le preguntó directamente en acta si respondería por el carácter de Ivanka, dijo, cito textualmente, no estoy en posición de brindar ese testimonio. Eso no es interpretación. Esa es la transcripción. Ahora los documentos de acuerdo, la evidencia. Primer documento presentado el jueves 5 de febrero. Saqué la página 23. Dice, citando aquí, la acusada Ivanka Marie Trump no se presentó en la FCI Danbury según lo ordenado por este tribunal, lo que constituye un incumplimiento deliberado de un mandato judicial legal. Esa no es mi opinión. Esa es la presentación. Lo que significa es que no se presentó cuando debía entregarse para ir a prisión.
Most defendants remain physically present when their lives fall apart in a courtroom. They hear the verdict. They absorb the sentence. They react emotionally, but they stay conscious. That is the ordinary human response to catastrophic news. The mind struggles, but the body continues to function. Yesterday, that did not happen. Yesterday, a federal defendant stood before a judge, listened to the final words of sentencing, and lost consciousness at the exact moment his future was erased. Not seconds later, not gradually, instantly. The judge had not even finished speaking when his eyes rolled back, his legs failed, and he dropped straight to the floor. I have seen defendants faint before. Panic attacks, medical episodes, emotional collapses. But I have never seen a person's body shut down at the precise instant a life sentence without parole was announced. The timing was exact, as if the brain received information it could not survive and simply disengaged. The case itself was not simple. It was an 8-week federal racketeering trial built around RICO statutes. Prosecutors alleged that the defendant ran a criminal enterprise spanning more than 15 years, involving drug trafficking, money laundering, and violence. Not isolated acts, and organization. The evidence was extensive. Wiretapped calls documented instructions. Financial records traced millions through layered shell companies. Cooperating witnesses testified to the structure of the operation and the defendant's leadership role. Physical evidence placed him at multiple crime scenes connected to enforcement and intimidation. The defense tried every standard argument: overreach, biased cooperators seeking reduced sentences, misinterpreted financial data. But the evidence was not fragmented, it was cumulative. Each piece reinforced the next. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury returned with verdicts on all 23 counts. Guilty. Every one. The clerk read them methodically. Count 1. Guilty. Count 2. Guilty. Count 3. Guilty. 23 times. The defendant did not move. He did not react. His attorneys had prepared him for this moment. Sit still. Show nothing. Preserve dignity. Save arguments for appeal. He followed that instruction perfectly. When the last verdict was read, he nodded once, almost imperceptibly. No tears, no shaking, no outburst. Anyone watching would have assumed he was holding together. And in a sense, he was. Because guilty verdicts are not the end in federal court, sentencing is where reality becomes fixed. And sentencing normally comes months later, after reports, recommendations, and arguments. Time exists between conviction and consequence. The defendant believed that time still existed. He knew the advisory guidelines: 25 to 30 years. Brutal, yes, but finite. There would be an end, a release date, a life afterward, however diminished. That possibility kept him composed. Then the judge disrupted the expected sequence. After dismissing the jury, she asked counsel to remain. She explained that she had already reviewed the pre-sentence investigation report. She had considered the statutory factors, and she was prepared to impose sentence immediately. The defense objected. They cited the defendant's right to allocution and preparation. The judge acknowledged the right, but ruled that sentencing would proceed today. That was the moment the defendant's posture changed. Not dramatically, subtly. His shoulders tensed. His breathing became shallow. His attorney leaned toward him and whispered urgently. The defendant shook his head slightly and whispered back. The defense attorney rose and placed an objection on the record. It was overruled. The judge began outlining the reasons for sentence. She spoke calmly, deliberately. She described the scale of the criminal enterprise: 15 years of narcotics distribution, financial systems designed to conceal proceeds, acts of violence used to enforce compliance and silence opposition. She identified the defendant as the leader, the decision-maker, the organizer, not a participant, the architect. She spoke about the harm caused: communities destabilized, families destroyed by addiction, victims threatened into silence, businesses coerced. Then she turned to the guidelines: 25 to 30 years. But, she explained, the guidelines are advisory, and in this case, they were insufficient. The judge explained that the